Hello. This is a cool Namwab. Okay, for anyone who's curious, a cool Namwab is Luke Bowman backwards. So, I don't expect you to try to pronounce that. Just call me Luke. My name is Luke. That's cool. So I'm having a conversation with a guy, and his name on the internet is Spock. I don't know what his real name is, but I must call him Spock, because I don't know his real name. Spock Talk, I guess is his real name. I mean, his full internet name. Anyway, I have typed out a response to him because we have been having a back and forth exchange about, politics, all sorts of stuff, so, I can't really offer you the entire context now if you're just jumping in here. If you want context for this, I mean, really it's important to watch his video if you're interested in what's going on here. Like, this is for the benefit of mostly me, Spock Talk, and a few people who might be interested in the debate of nationalism and Minarchism versus Anti-statism, that sort of thing. Spock Talk. The following will be addressed to you, and I'm reading the whole thing, so I'll put the text in the description bar below. So if you want to read along with me, if I fumble my words, if you can't understand what I'm saying because I talk too fast, it's all down there. So enjoy. Or if you read faster than I talk, or if you can't stand my mindless, inane ramblings right now, don't worry, I'll stop. Spock Talk. You say that you have a problem with my analogy that advocating statism is similar to advocating slavery on the off chance that the slave master will do what you want. You have a problem with this because you say political positions are supposed to be about the ideal. So it doesn't make sense to only advocate something if the promised result is guaranteed. I think you're missing my point, Spock Talk. Your position is invalid from my perspective because it gets you nowhere from a practical position. It doesn't fail simply because it's not guaranteed to work. Like, I maintain that it is very comparable to advocating slavery on the off chance that you might find yourself in a position of power. Assuming this metaphor is valid, surely you can see how advocating slavery doesn't necessarily help you achieve a particular political goal. This is assuming you don't know who will end up being a slave. You say that the citizen agrees with the state on certain things, and so the metaphor fails. Well, the slave will always agree with the slave master on certain things. Like, for example, the slave will always agree that the slave should be kept fed, rested, generally in good health. But both relationships are forced, and so they inherently contain conditions that both parties would not agree to voluntarily. This is the common ground that the metaphor is trying to express. The fact that there is not one person in control of the state is irrelevant to the point I'm making. You say that we all have some control over the state, and so to compare it to slavery is invalid. Well, the bottom line is that people do not have equal control over the state. Like, by what political theory do you think we would? And if you don't want to pursue more power disparity, then why don't you simply advocate no state at all? A state, by its very nature, is an attempt to shift power towards a certain group. And if you're afraid of this growing population of inferior people in the United States, then how does supporting a system that will give them equal say help you in the least? You say that I'm against uniformity in laws. Well, I'm not simply against uniformity in laws. I don't believe in them. Laws are a projection of collective morality, and there is no grand collective morality that we all follow. So therefore there is no grand law that governs us all. There will always be people who don't believe in property rights. There will always be Muslims who support Sharia law. There will always be bigotries of all different kinds. To say that you are just going to make the law uniform doesn't change the reality of the situation. You can't say you're going to shoot everyone who disagree with you either, because, you're never really going to run out of people to shoot, because you never really quite agree. There's no objective morality. It's all just shifting and changing based on perspective and evolving circumstance. I am not a pacifist, and most people agree that there is a place for violence as a means for self-defense. But it's a different story to try to spread your political ideology through violence. Like, if there was some objective morality that could be discovered and agreed upon by all rational people, then it might make sense to just kill off all the deviations from the truth. But it's not that simple. The only way to guarantee our ideas are superior is to allow them to be scrutinized through logical debate, simply because this process tends to, more than anything, favor the more logical. The process of war itself is indiscriminate about what ideas are being spread. Like, you may think you're right, but everyone thinks they're right, and I would argue that I'm finding many little ways in which your logic isn't very sound right here. So to think that you're just correct and so it's okay to spread it through violence or whatever means, like, that's pretty much the basis of all war ever, is that people think that they're right and that they should be able to spread their ideology through violence. Like, take fundamentalist Christianity for instance. If you fight them in a war of guns and bombs, you will likely lose. In the United States, they have the numbers and the conviction to win, and the fact that what they believe in is obviously false is irrelevant. However, if you fight fundamentalist Christianity in the realm of debate, then you have the advantage. Of course, if a fundamentalist Christian cannot be reasoned with, and he's going to kill you for whatever reason, like, I support using violence for self-defense, but it still makes no sense to use violence to wipe out destructive dogmas. Like, if they're wrong, you can simply show them how they're wrong, and rational, younger generations who haven't had these ridiculous notions beaten into them through shame and, abusive tactics, we can spread ideas to them. We could spread rational ideas to the younger generation. We don't have to kill people just because they don't agree with us or they can't change their mind or whatever. If you advocate war, statism, or any other form of terrorism, then you empower the groups that rely on the suppression of rational discourse. You may create the state hoping to enforce your secular utilitarian vision, but it's also quite likely that the state will just be taken over by the religious minority, or religious majority rather, and other cultures you wish to protect yourself from. Next, on to property. You say property requires the state, essentially. And you disagree that property began with social agreements. Well, no, I do still believe that property does begin with a social agreement. Like, it is true that these social agreements are ultimately enforced through violence, but it all starts with an agreement. Force is part of the equation, but the bottom line is that you also need a common philosophy if property rights are going to be enforced. It is not simply true that the most powerful person determines the property rights. If this were true, the most powerful person would have successfully claimed ownership over everything a long time ago, and just handed it out to whoever he chose. The world runs in part on morality, because morality is a big motivator for us as social creatures. We want to do things for others, for the group, for the whole which we feel a part of. And you seem to imply that because violence is necessary for the enforcement of property, we need a state. And I think once again you're just conflating the state with violence. And I covered that in my last video to you, so I'll link that below too. Your whole premise seems to be that a growing population of the United States does not believe in the right form of property. Well, if this is the case, then why wouldn't this growing population simply use the power of the state to outlaw your notion of property? If we all have equal control, after all. This is representational government. You say that nationalism is useful because you only meet so many people, and so nationalism allows you to feel a collective identity with people you don't know. Well, then why don't you simply support a global culture with one collective identity? Like, I know your answer to this. You will say that you don't identify with everyone on the planet, and yes, that's my point. You shouldn't be pressured to identify with a greater whole that you would not normally identify with. Like, if that's the case, then why wouldn't you just identify with the planet and everything? The concept of nationalism, as in supporting the United States, for instance, groups you in with people that you don't necessarily identify with, and it segregates you from people that you would normally identify with. Like, I know you recognize this. And I think on a logical level, your support of your nation-state makes about as much sense to you as it does to me. Like, we both seem to recognize that it makes no sense, and yet you continue to believe in it, and I don't understand that. Like, this is a general point I want to make against nationalism. Nationalists generally define nation as a common culture, race, or language. But this has nothing to do with the notion of America, or Canada, or Britain, or any other country, since America, for instance, has no common language, culture, race. So nationalists don't really believe in America, or at least I should say that they have no rational reason to believe in it. Nationalists seem to want to defend the border around a concept, the United States, that they don't even believe in. Like, this seems to be a very basic philosophical problem that most nationalists seem to share. Like, it's fine if you want to identify with a particular culture and you see yourself as a collective. That makes more sense. Or whatever, even if it's whatever trait you want to identify with, that might make more sense. But America? Like, what is America? And that's pretty much everything I had to say. Number one, I would love to get a response on that nationalism point from anyone. Like, like Spock. When you defend the border of the U.S., you're defending the border around a concept that you don't even believe in by your own definition. Your definition of nationalism is common race, language, or culture, I believe. Correct me if I'm missing one. But the point is, none of these things correlate with the concept U.S. The U.S. has nothing to do with any of these things at this point, so, peace.